So today we have Professor B. Ramgopal Rao. I would like to give brief introduction about him. He is the Group Vice Chancellor for BITS Pilani. Prior to joining BITS, he was the Director of IIT Delhi, and before that, he was the Chief Investigator of Nanoelectronics Project at IIT Bombay. He is the author of more than 500 publications and as well as 50 patents. Professor Rao is the recipient of many awards, including Santaswarup Bhatnagar Prize. So, along with this brief introduction, sir, my first question is that I was reading about you. You have done all your schooling in regional languages and done your bachelor's from Kakatiya University. So, and after that, you joined IIT Bombay for masters and you went to Munich for PhD. So, how was this journey, sir? Like from all schooling in regional language, then this transition, sir. How was this transition and how was this journey?
So, in fact, I come from a very rural background, Kolhapur. It's in Telangana state, not the Kolhapur in Maharashtra. Telangana, there is a small village called Kolhapur in the Nagar Karnool district now. And so I'm born in a lower middle class family, but in a family which values education. So therefore, education was the only thing we knew, kind of a thing. So, but having been born there, I attended the school there, and so that school happened to be in Telugu medium. There was no other, way to get educated there. And but if I needed English medium, then I needed to go to Hyderabad, and that was beyond my reach. So got educated in the government schools in my village, and up to 12th actually. So I had no other choice. But 11th and 12th were pretty difficult because at that time there was an entrance examination for the local engineering colleges. But we did not have proper teachers, and it was a bit of a challenge. Studying in Telugu medium and not having proper teachers 11th and 12th for some subjects. But I was bright. I was good in whatever I did. And that time, the entrance examination in Telugu was available for only the local exams, the local colleges. So I took that exam, and then I got admission there in Warangal, and then I went there. And so it was a struggle. I mean, but the undergraduate programs, the BTech was in English, and I studied in Telugu. So it took me almost like a year to get familiarized with the terms, because our Telugu at that time was, even the technical terms we use in Telugu, right? So atom is not atom in Telugu. Atom is a paramanu in Telugu, and so electron is a different name in Telugu. And so just mapping those that terminology itself was a bit of a challenge. So it was a bit of a struggle, but it was okay. It took me a year, and once I got familiarized with English, it was all right. I did not have any problem after that, and then I graduated in with BTech. I got distinction and all that, and then I went to IIT Bombay for my masters, and that was my turning point. And once I reached IIT Bombay, until that time I had no idea what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And for many of us coming from those backgrounds, that time getting a government job was everything. So you want to become an engineer because you want to take those APPSC, that time Andhra Pradesh Public Service Commission exams, and become an engineer in some government sector, and that was the life's ambition. So I was also thinking like that only. But after joining IIT Bombay, at least I could realize my own potential. I realized that my strength lies in research. So that was a very important realization. Once I realized that I can. What do you need for research? The thing that you need for research is, if I read something, I should be able to comprehend what is there, right, in that paper.
Yes, sir.
And secondly, I should be able to imagine, right? I mean, I have read this, but if I'm not able to ask the right questions, and if I'm not able to think beyond what is there in the paper, then you won't be able to push the boundaries of any area further. But I was very good with my imagination. I was very good with my comprehension. And so then I realized that my strength lies in research. So instead of seeking jobs and other things, then I wanted to pursue a PhD. because I realized that, because I now am good in research, I wrote a paper in Journal of Applied Physics out of my master's thesis. And so once I did that, then I wanted to pursue PhD. And I actually joined IIT Bombay for my PhD. I had no intention of
Okay.
going abroad because, my professor was very good. I worked with Professor Vasi at that time, and he was a top professor in that area. And I started my PhD in IIT Bombay, and but then, as fate would have it, there was an offer from Germany for a sandwich model PhD program that you register in an Indian university and you go to Germany, work for 1 year, one and a
Okay.
half years, come back to India and submit the thesis. That was the model. I went to Germany, with that same ambition that I will work for 1.5 years and then come back to India, submit thesis in IIT Bombay. But again, there the professor I came across, and so I did some very interesting work in Germany on vertical MOSFETs, and I solved some of the problems which they were struggling with. So professor was so happy, and he said, since you have done most of your work here, I had spent 2 years in Germany, and he said, why do you want to go back and submit? Why don't you submit here? We will be able to give you a degree here. But then I wrote back to IIT Bombay to my professor, and he said, there is no problem, we can do that. And then I submitted my thesis in Germany. It was just a two years of work. So I got my doctor engineer degree, and then I wanted now, because I am good in research, I wanted to pursue that career further. So I knew that a good postdoctoral fellowship will be useful. And then I went to US. I went to UCLA for my postdoctoral fellowship. I spent close to 2 years, and I wrote lots of papers from my UCLA work. Almost every month I wrote a paper there. 'Cause that time, I used to work for at least 16 hours a day, and so I think it was a very productive period in UCLA. Then I came back and joined IIT Bombay. So that's how that realization at IIT Bombay that I am good in research made me to pursue a career in research. And once IIT Bombay offered me a job, I came back and I immediately joined IIT Bombay. So that's how
So, sir,
my research career began. So
imagination is the key that like made you realize you are good for research. Okay.
exactly.
Okay, sir. Sir, my second question is, what inspired you to pursue a career in science? Like, yeah, you are good in research, but what inspired you? Is there anything on what keeps you motivated throughout your journey?
So this is, because the problems that were given to me in my MTech, I did not choose them. There were multiple projects ongoing at the time at IIT Bombay. I joined one of the projects that was a radiation hard, CMOS technologies, making integrated circuits radiation hard for space applications. That was a project funded by ISRO at that time in IIT Bombay. So I worked on that project. And then when I went to Germany, the work was on building a sub 100 nanometer MOSFETs. At that time, the world was working on a few microns kind of a technology. But then there was a project sponsored by Siemens at that time. In the university, I pursued my PhD on developing sub 100 nanometer devices. So I got a chance to work on that project. And so that's how I got into nanoelectronics. It was not really my choice. And then in UCLA, I continued the same work, a very similar kind of a work in my postdoc. When I joined IIT Bombay, then as a faculty member, I had all the options available. So now, until that time, the projects were given to me by the professors, the supervisor. So I had no choice on what I wanted to work. But once I became a faculty member in IIT Bombay, I could choose any problem I wanted, and I could have done whatever I wanted. So that is the flexibility, the freedom that you enjoy in an academic institute. An industry, often doesn't give you that kind of a freedom. And even if when you are a PhD student, you often don't get that freedom to work on whatever you
Yes,
want, right? But as a faculty member, I had that freedom. But usually people continue on their own PhD postdoc work, right? You don't come and
yes,
start totally new thing. I also did not do that. I started working on the same project, whichever I worked in UCLA and in Germany, and that I did for almost like 7 years. In 98, I joined IIT Bombay, 1998. Until 2004, 2005, I just continued the same work. There was nothing, no change. I could have done that in US, I could have done that in Germany, but I decided to do that in India. We wrote lots of papers because I had already good samples. I had good devices, and I had a lot of expertise in that area, which was very unique. And so I could write tons of papers. I mean, large number of papers, almost 80, 90 papers I had. By the time in about every year, I used to write at least 20 papers category in my first 7, 8 years. And then I got all the awards. I got the Swarna Jayanti Fellowship, the Bhatnagar Fellowship. I became a fellow of INEAE at a very young age.
Yes.
My so it was all working very well for me. And but that is when I made a transition. Until that time, just publishing papers was my key focus. I did not,
Okay.
decide anything else. Wherever there is a scope to publish a paper, I would write a paper. But in 2005, I very consciously decided to do something which will have, some relevance to the society around me,
Different.
right? And
Yes.
not just, because I am a semiconductor specialist. In 2005, there was no semiconductor industries in India, so all
Yes.
my research was with Intel, IBM, those kind of companies, and they are none of them is an Indian company. So therefore, it was just work to publish papers. They would
Yes.
provide some funding. Some funding will come from government of India, and I have students. I created facilities, and I would write a good paper. So that were all what
Yes.
mattered to me at that time. And but once I decided to work on problems which are of relevance to the society around me, then I very consciously started to develop expertise in sensors, because I
Yes.
realized that sensors is one area where India can take a lead. I still very strongly
Yes.
believe in that, sensors and IoT. And so I
Mhm.
realized that agriculture requires new sensors,
Yes.
is security requires new sensors, healthcare requires new sensors, so diagnostic devices. So I very consciously started to focus on sensors, and again, but then to develop the expertise, to develop the facilities, to identify a problem, that was where I started to focus on. So starting from 2005 onwards, whatever work I did, it was
Yes.
not the work which I imagined as important. It was the work which was given to me by, in some cases, security agencies, in some cases, medical doctors, right? And so in all of these cases, the problem definition came from the requirement people had.
Okay.
So once the problems were defined by them, right, then I could build a group to along a multidisciplinary kind of a group with faculty from different departments. And so that was the first time, because until 2005 my work was entirely doubly focused, and I did not need too many collaborators. But once
Yes.
I started to develop more system kind of a work, because how
Yes,
would
sir.
you impact the society wouldn't get impacted by publishing papers, right? That society
Yes.
wouldn't even care. The for society, you need to develop full systems which they can use, which improves some quality of life somewhere. Farmers would earn more income. In the
Yes.
security agencies can save more lives, right? If it is healthcare, you are
Mhm.
able to diagnose a disease very early, very low cost. So I
Yes.
think that is how the problem statements came. But all of that work becomes inherently multidisciplinary. You cannot develop it with one single discipline. So then I started to build multidisciplinary groups, and so that's how the
Yes.
transition happened for me after about 6 to 7 years. 7 years. But when I look
Yes.
back, it was important, because if I had started to work on problems of social relevance, immediately after I joined as an assistant professor, I wouldn't have been able to write so many papers, right? Because it
Yes.
is a new area for me. And
Yeah.
then if I had not written so many papers, I wouldn't have got all the recognitions that I got, because all those
Mhm.
recognitions were important for me to for people to take me seriously. In a
Yes.
multidisciplinary group, if I go to somebody in chemistry and ask that faculty member to work with me, if I am not
Mhm.
even known, if I have not done any work in my own area, nobody would collaborate with me. They think that I
Yes.
am utilizing their resources, and then riding on their knowledge to gain some recognition. So people would have a very low opinion. But by then,
Yes.
but since I got my Bhatnagar and Swarna Jayanti, so I was recognized, and then so I could go to anybody and collaborate with anyone. And so that was good. So I built a platform for the first 7 years by writing papers, by establishing myself as a good researcher in my own area. And then I started to connect with multiple faculty members, build groups, identify problems of societal relevance, and then start working on them. So I think that journey was indeed important. So
Sir, like collaboration is key, but first you establish yourself. After that, you should start collaborating. Yeah,
totally.
like I was reading about your nanoelectronics project. There were six departments involved in that project. IIT.
It's very important because that's a mistake many people do. I mean, people,
Yes.
suddenly think that I have to collaborate because everybody is asking me to collaborate. But then they, every paper will have some 15 authors, 10 authors,
Yes.
and then somebody will ask, but what is your contribution in that? And then, all those things become complicated. And so the credit also is a challenge when you collaborate with multiple people, because who will get the credit for what you have done? And all those challenges will come, but once you are established yourself, then you have the confidence. I have my own
Yes.
research. Whatever collaborations I am doing is additional, is bonus, is extra. I mean, I'm not dependent on those collaborations. My life and career will not depend on the collaborations. I
Yes.
think that's very important, because otherwise, sometimes the credit sharing often becomes a big challenge in such collaboration. So but we have to live with it. But I think therefore
Yes.
establishing oneself is very important before you go out of your own comfort zone
Yes.
and collaborate with others. So for that, you need to create your own comfort zone first. So,
Yes. Sir, what keeps you motivated? Like it's very long journey, and you are doing this. Sometimes you stuck on some problem and you are not getting any results. So, like, what things derives you to like work harder or to motivate yourself for research?
I think, in research, while I said imagination is very important, the second
Yes.
quality that is very important is also perseverance, right? So the you should not be giving up, because every stage there will be problems. When we wanted to develop an explosive detector, we tried so many concepts, nothing worked. Everything looked like it's possible. It's possible to develop the technology, and then we graduated PhD students, wrote a lot of papers, but finally when we tested it in the field, there were challenges, nothing worked really. But then we could have given up on that. So but we did not do that. Fortunately, one added to another, and it took us 10 years, full 10 years to get a technology from lab to take it to the market, right? The nanosniff is the company
Yes,
which
sir.
we founded, and that company played a very crucial role in taking the technology to market. Now there are at least over a dozen airports in India which are using the technology, but that was a 10 years of journey, and that journey was not all successful kind of a thing. There were
Yes,
so many things we did not even work, and we did publish papers in all of that, but finally in the field they all had various issues. So perseverance is very important, and if you start giving up every time you face a hurdle, you will never do anything. So that, because
yes,
if something is so easy, somebody would have done that. I mean, we are not Einsteins, and we are not those people endowed with extraordinary capabilities, right? No, we
yes,
have above ordinary intelligence, maybe, and but we are hardworking, right? And so,
yes,
and if we start giving up on everything, then nothing will happen. So these are all very common. I mean, we should always keep in mind that there are so many bright people out there, and if they have not been able to solve it, and if we are solving it, right? What is the only way you can do that is by just persisting to in that area. The perseverance is the key. So I think that's the only way you can achieve results eventually. Unfortunately, in a PhD, you don't have so much of time, right? What happens is
yes,
PhD, you need to graduate in 4 to 5 years, and then
yes,
you got into a problem and you are not getting results. But there you cannot follow that approach. But in
yes,
PhD, that's where the supervisor's role becomes very important. I blame it on the supervisor if a particular project or if a student takes much longer to graduate. That's because supervisor is giving problems which are not solvable in that 4 years or 5 years time
yes,
frame. And so supervisor's role therefore is very critical, because a student might just keep on working on it for years and years, but then if you spend 7 years, 8 years, 9 years on the PhD problem, then it's not good for the student, from the career point of view. Therefore the supervisor's role is very important to ensure that, because supervisor can see further ahead than the student doesn't have that
yes,
experience. In any area, I can see what might happen in the next 1 year, right? So
yes,
so therefore, it's my role, the supervisor's role, to ensure that my students graduate in a reasonable time frame.
yes,
Sometimes it doesn't happen. I have graduated 53 PhD students now, but the average is about 4 years. But then there were some students who took longer. I mean, for various reasons. Not everything is the student's fault or the supervisor's fault. So many things can go wrong in a
yes,
academic institute. But average, is 4 to 5 years is what we should all ensure that our students graduate in. And anything longer than that, I would uh, think the supervisor has not done a great job, kind of a thing.
yes. Sir, you have done so much work. So if I ask what was that one Eureka moment when you realized, yes, we did it. So like all your work, it was
There were a few moments like that. This
yes,
is, the thing is, these are all continuous incremental improvements, right?
yes,
Nothing happens overnight that, when it happens, it's great. So some people, it might have happened. But for me, who is more of an engineering kind of research, where I am trying to solve a problem, that problem gets solved. But then there's another problem to solve. So it's always incremental, incremental by the time you develop a complete kind of a system. But I remember, on a once we were working on a tunnel fed thing, right?
okay,
And we found a very interesting idea, and which we did some simulations, and it looked like that's a very great idea, and everybody in the world I know was struggling to improve the ion-IF ratios and all of that, the subthreshold swings, bringing them below the 60 millivolts per decade kind of values. And but we found an idea, we did simulations, we found that it works. And that I had a collaborator in Germany. That project was sponsored by Infineon in Germany, and I immediately called my collaborator in Germany, said that this is very exciting. Can we file a patent immediately tomorrow? Can we file a US patent? And you were also excited. I think those moments I've had a few,
yes,
but most of my research is is developing systems, right? So from materials
yes, sir,
I build systems. So from
yes,
materials to devices to circuits to systems. So therefore
yes,
it's a long journey, everything I do. And in these, because I'm more of a systems oriented kind of a person, there's always an incremental progress, but there are many such eureka moments. So,
yes. Sir, you are a successful researcher, academician, teacher. You served as a administrator, director of IIT Delhi. Now you are a group vice chancellor of BITS. So, if I may ask, which role was most challenging and how did you manage them?
you know, uh, I have served in all these roles as a teacher,
Yes,
as a researcher, as an
yes,
administrator, all of that. Right,
yes,
being a researcher, right, and
yes,
writing high quality papers, getting them accepted in a top journal is always more difficult than any other role. And I give, therefore, the highest regard, highest respects to people who are researchers. And all these administrative roles, you don't even use more than 30% of your brain. It all they become routine. After some time, you are dealing with the same things and dealing with people. Most of the administration is
yes,
essentially people's management, right? Of
yes,
course, you will have a vision, you need to have a strategy. All of those can be done, but they are much simpler compared to doing research, writing a paper published, after getting it reviewed by, after three reviewers sit on your paper and keep arguing with you on everything that you have done. That is more stressful, more impactful. And I don't know the impact, what part of it can decide, can one can argue, but that is more difficult than any other role. If I have a great researcher and a great administrator, any day I would respect a great researcher at least 10 times more than an administrator.
okay, yes. So this question I ask every scientist whenever I take interview that what are your hope and expectations for the future of science and technology in India?
India needs to do many things differently. Right now, if you ask me, what is that we are able to do very well? We are able to do research, right? With whatever money that is given to us, we are able to publish papers. Some of them
Yes,
are good papers too. So we are already ranked third in the world and all of that. Now, since
yes,
everybody is asking us to file patents, we have even figured out how to file patents. So therefore,
yes,
India is also filing lots of patents. But this
yes,
is not going to take us anywhere. More patents, more publications doesn't mean anything, right? In the
yes,
larger context of things. What research is what? Finally, you want to be impactful. If I have written 500 papers, if you ask me what has come out of these 500 papers, what is that has changed because of these 500 papers? I can tell you, I have developed this, I have developed that, this industry has used, that industry has used. So therefore, the impact is eventually important. So the how is your research visible into the society, right? Does it eventually help somebody at some place? An industry, has it
yes,
helped? Or if you have developed a product and some people are using it, it has developed, it has improved their quality of life, or it has saved some lives. I think those are the parameters on which the impact is measured. But we as scientists also measure our impact through citations, right? If I have
yes,
more
sir.
citations, then I am a better researcher category,
Yes,
which is
sir.
okay. So therefore, how you measure impact can vary depending on which
Yes, sir.
field you come from. In some areas, citations may matter, right? But I'm an engineer. As an
Yes,
engineer,
sir.
for me, citations are not everything, right? I do want to
Yes,
have a lot of papers. I do want to have a lot of citations, but I don't want to judge an engineer based on how many citations I have, right? That is not the right thing for an engineer particularly. For me, have I impacted some sectors through my research, right? So
yes,
that is where India is lagging right now. I mean, India is doing a lot of research, but the impact of that research is not even visible in the society, and that needs to change. That needs to change. It can change by multiple ways. One of the ways it can change is we need to bring relevance to our research, right? I
yes,
can choose something is important. I can spend my lifetime on in solving that problem, but is it relevant to the society? Is it relevant to somebody, right? So that is where collaborations will help. That is where you
yes,
need to, for example, the collaborations with the society, right?
yes,
Are looking at what are the societal problems. Can I take
yes,
up one of these problems? For example, farmers, right? Farmers are not
yes,
able to make enough money, and the yields are very low. 50%
yes,
of India is into agriculture, but our their
yes,
contribution to the GDP is just 14%, 15% kind of a thing. How do I boost the productivity in agriculture? That will require reducing the input costs and improving the yield of the crop, right?
yes,
That will require technologies. Now I can spend my lifetime solving that problem, developing sensors for precision agriculture, the low cost technologies, working with the farmers, going to the field. I think that is when the impact will actually
yes,
come. That kind of research is not happening in India, and it's not happening in India because our academic institutions are in a silo, right? Government is not engaging them enough to solve the
yes,
problem. Because government, some ministries, right? If you go to Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Heavy Industries, Ministry of Rural Development, all of them will have problems. Because many of them
yes,
are working on the ground, but these ministries have no way to engage with the academia, right? And
yes,
which are the ministries which will engage with academia? Ministry of Education, right? Or
yes,
Department of Science and Technology. And these are the Ministry of Science and Technology. The Ministry of Science and Technology, Department of the Ministry of Education, they don't have any societal, they don't know
yes,
what are the agriculture problems, they don't know what are the industry problems, they don't know any of the problems in the society, because they are only
yes,
dealing
sir.
with academic institutions directly. So therefore,
Yes,
this working in a silo where the actual nodal ministries which have the real problems, right, and their lack of engagement or the engagement model with the academia is the biggest challenge in India right now, right? Ministry of Education ideally should source problems from all these ministries and pose them to the academia along with the funding. And Department of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Science and Technology, again needs to source problems from all these nodal ministries and then pose those problems as grand challenges to academia and then provide funding. So therefore, that kind of an approach is missing because every ministry works in its own silos, and every ministry,
yes,
every secretary, because there are all lots of issues in the for interministerial kind of a collaboration that is not very easy in Delhi particularly. So as a result, everybody is working in a silo. and the academia doesn't get to work on the right kind of problems because nobody gives those problems to them. And industry academia collaborations are hardly there right now. I mean, they are beginning to happen, but India today ranks some 66th or something when it comes to academia industry collaborations, right?
Collaborations.
US, for example, when I was in UCLA, there was not a single problem, which was not given by the industry. The professor had some 15 PhD students. Every PhD student had, some support from industry because the problems came from industry along with funding. And these people who were working on the industry problem along with the industry mentor, and whatever you were doing, somebody was benefiting there. So that was how in 1998, I was there in UCLA 97, 98, and that academia industry collaboration was so deep rooted and so strong. Every PhD student was having an industry mentor. In India, it's totally missing, and so that's another reason why, which we need to, somehow strengthen the academia industry collaborations. Without that, again the same problem, right? You do something, but
Yes,
nobody is
sir.
interested. So and then strategic agencies, right? The DRDO, ISRO, and DRDO now is doing better. DRDO now has established multiple centers of excellence in academic institutions. So they are beginning to engage the academia. But it should have happened 30 years ago, should have happened 20 years
Yes.
ago. They created their own labs and they were doing all of that. But academia was never part of the developing technologies for strategic sector, right? So again,
Yes.
that connection we need to establish. ISRO still doesn't collaborate enough with academia, right? Because
It
they have
is.
their own labs, they do all the work in their own labs. But I think that these are the
Yes.
kind of missing links. If you look at US, right? US,
Mm.
all these major strategic agencies have presence on academic institutions. Their major labs are in academic institutions, kind of places, and they very strongly engage with academia for all of their research needs. And so these, I think, connecting academia to society, through these ministerial kind of collaborations,
Yes.
connecting academia to industry by strengthening that partnerships, connecting academia to strategic agencies, and imagine if all of these people come to academia, give the right kind of problems, provide funding, Indian academia would have been totally different, right? But in
Yes.
the absence of those collaborations and linkages, what would a poor professor do? Imagine a problem, go to
Yes.
DST with a proposal,
Mm.
and DST will give them some 60 lakh rupees and takes that money. With that money, the only
Yes.
thing you can do is publish some papers, right? And
Published papers.
that's what we are doing. Nothing wrong with academia. You cannot even blame academia for that because they are pushed to do that. I think thanks to
Yes.
all these, kind of ecosystem that we have developed or not developed. So these are the challenges in academia. I think otherwise academia has huge strengths. There are some finest people serving in these institutions. Now, if you are looking for some great scientists, great engineers, or looking for people who are very innovative, you will still find them in our top institutions. But they are not being
Yes.
engaged properly by any of these
Yes.
agencies, right? So I think these things, when they change, India will not only write, of course, more quality papers, but the science, the technologies that are getting developed will also become visible in the society. Because some industry takes my research, develop her products, somebody will in society will benefit. Then they will say that, oh, this technology developed in this institute has saved my life, has made my my yield improvement in the agriculture,
Yes.
right? So I think that is when academic institutions will become world class, and that is when academia will justify its role in the society. And because you are
Yes.
connected with all these agencies, the students will also be better trained, right? You are
Yes.
working on an industry problem, or on a ministry supported problem, or on a strategic agency supported problem. Once you graduate, they will also want to hire you, right? So
Yes, sir.
that is how the whole ecosystem will develop. That's how we will find
Yes.
more jobs, for students. The students
Yes.
will be industry ready. But in the
Yes.
absence of that, I don't see much happening. NRF was supposed to be supposed to play that role, right? And
Well,
but funding is also a problem in India. We
yes.
are not even spending enough money, right? In government of India is spending what as a percentage of GDP, pretty low amounts, zero point 0.6 to
Yeah.
0.6%. And out of that 0.6%, 0.3% goes for DRDO, ISRO kind of agencies. So what academia
Yes.
gets is some 0.3, 0.4%. I always give this statistic what China spends on two universities, Peking and Tsinghua. You can actually check the numbers. What China
Okay.
spends on two universities is India's entire higher education budget. right? Higher education, how many institutions India has.
Yes.
That is the equivalent of spending right now, between China and India. And obviously, we will be like this only if we don't change, some of these
Yes.
kind of challenges.
How we will compete with China in future if this is the case.
Yeah, we need to invest more. We need to
Yes.
create schemes and programs for all these agencies to interact with academia. So academia needs to be at the center of whole thing, right? Everybody goes to
Yes.
them for the problems. Industry goes to them,
Yes.
ministries go to them, and strategy agencies go to them. That is how academia will strengthen, and that is how we
Mhm.
produce future leaders, and that is how the innovation potential of academia can be fully
Yes.
utilized.
Yes. Sir, when like research directly connect to the society, but what about the basic science? How
Basic
that
science.
will not be?
Yeah. No, it's
Yes.
very critical. Today's basic science is tomorrow's research, tomorrow's
Yes.
technology, right? And if you
Yes.
cut down funding for basic research, you are basically breaking the pipeline, right? For
Yes.
example, take the case of Einstein. Einstein predicted gravitational waves like 100 years ago, right?
Yes.
Now, gravitational waves, what would you call it? It's not applied research, it's basic
Yes.
research, right? I mean, somebody was looking at some waves coming from space, and what nobody thought will have any application. But after 100 years, right? Once you were able to detect the gravitational waves experimentally, Einstein only
Yes.
predicted them, but they were detected experimentally, only about a decade ago, and then they received the Nobel Prize for that. Now it has provided another tool to explore the space, right?
Yes.
So earlier we were only using those telescopes and all of that. Now you can use gravitational waves as another tool to explore the space. Now it is applied research. So therefore,
Yes.
sometimes the gestation period can be different. Sometimes the
Yes.
basic research can become applied immediately. Sometimes it can become take longer. Gravity, for example, the quantum technologies, right? It
Yes.
was basic. Nobody thought quantum will have any application. Quantum
Yes.
research, I've been hearing that since my PhD days, right? For 30 years, people have been talking of quantum, and now everywhere you are talking of quantum communication,
Yes.
quantum computers, quantum sensors,
Yes.
and quantum has, penetrating into every sector. It has taken 30
Yes.
years for the basic quantum science to actually become a technology. So therefore,
Yes.
science eventually leads to technology. And basic research is as important as any applied research. And if you cut down funding for basic research, there will be no technology in the future. And then, you are basically breaking the pipeline, for translating that basic research to applied research. And there is a huge role for the basic researchers, the researchers who work on fundamental problems, and they are very critical, very important, and they should be supported to the fullest extent possible.
So, sir, this is my last question. What advice would you give to young researcher or young PhD students? They are doing PhD in India.
I think the thing is, as a PhD student, you need to develop some strength, some skill, some confidence
Okay.
in what you are doing,
Yes.
right? And I think you should write good papers. As a PhD student, the way you will be judged, your work will be judged in at least 9 out of 10 cases is from your publications, right?
Yes.
So therefore, as a PhD student, you should write some good papers, and so leave the rest of it to your supervisor, how to apply that and how to build systems and all of that. But if you are working on a problem, where you cannot write enough good papers, you will, people will not take you seriously when you
Yes.
want to apply for jobs and all of that. As a research, as a PhD student, I want to finish my PhD in a appropriate kind of a duration. Let's say 4 to 5 years maximum,
Yes.
and I want to write some decent papers in journals, at least 3 or 4 decent journal papers as a first author, because
Yes.
PhD is the only time when you write first author papers. When you become a postdoc, you go to second author. When you become a faculty member, you are pushed further to the last author in many of
Last.
our areas. So therefore, PhD is the only time when you write those first author papers, because you are the lead author. You have done all the work.
Yes.
Right? So those I would expect at least 4 papers as the first author for a good, high quality PhD thesis in journals. Right? There are conferences, of course. Many computer scientists publish papers in conferences rather than in journals. So it's difficult to justify journals or conferences. But depending on your area, whatever the peers consider in that area as difficult papers to publish, because they go through a thorough review. I think in those journals and conferences, you want to have some good number of papers, and then the real freedom comes when you become an independent researcher. That means as a faculty member or working in a lab or whatever it is. So that is when you can explore whatever you want to, right? All your ideas and everything. PhD is basically a license to do research. Or what if I do, if I see a PhD thesis where a student has done well, I know that here is a student who can understand, and comprehend a difficult area, right? And write papers which are reviewed by peers, right? And and can still get through the entire process. I mean, entire process of peer review, and came out with flying colors. That's what is the confidence that I gain when I see a good researcher with good publications, a PhD student with good publications. And once I gain that confidence, and of course, if you change your topics, I know that the person will again do equally well, right? Because the person knows now the whole process of doing quality research and publishing good quality kind of papers. So I think that's what I would think. What a PhD student needs to be doing. And I have, like I said, you know, guided over almost like 53 PhD students now, and I would want to see them do well. I always wanted to see them do well, right? And for that, I know that they have to write some good papers so that they can find a good position, and then they can explore all their ideas, and then their everything. So therefore, it was always very important for me to ensure that my PhD students, can work on a problem independently, and I don't also, never get involved too much in their research. I don't want to spoon feed them or anything like that. I give them enough options. They choose out of those options what they feel is important, because unless you are excited about your research, you will
Yes,
never do well in your PhD. So and
yes,
if PhD supervisor is after you, sitting on your head every day, morning, night, and guiding you, you will never become an independent researcher. So I think we need to
yes,
give students that freedom, that scope to explore, what they want to do within the confined boundaries, of course, because suddenly if you join me, you cannot say that I want to work on space technology. I can't guide you on space technology. So I will have some boundaries. So but within those boundaries, you choose a topic and do well in that area. Then you take up a job somewhere and explore your space technology. I don't have a problem. But my role is to ensure that you become confident enough, you become good enough, and to find a good job as your first job. Until that point, I consider it to be my responsibility. So after that, you are on your own. So that's what the supervisor's role is, which is very important in a PhD thesis. So.
okay. Sir, can you comment on master student, like how they should judge, they should go for PhD or they should take a job? Like
In
what
fact,
thing they should consider before joining PhD?
yeah. So my own example, I wanted to pursue PhD because I got that realization that I can do well in research. So that is
Yes.
important. So if you hate doing that kind of a work, you will not make a good PhD student. You should not even pursue a PhD. If you are good in building something, right, and you
Mhm.
want to earn money immediately for whatever reason it is, then PhD is not for you. So PhD, because PhD is often not well paying, and PhD, you are working on one single problem for a long period of time, and it requires certain sort of attitude or aptitude, to become a good PhD scholar, and but that is what the selection processes need to ensure. So
Yes.
masters or PhD depends on one's background, one's interest, one's requirements. Sometimes there are responsibilities. PhD will take 4 years, and do I want to commit that kind of a time because I want to do some other thing? I need to support family. So I think so many constraints come into picture. It's very difficult to say that, but for me,
Yes.
PhD is a way to become good at something. Right? And after the end of
Okay.
that thesis, after working on something for 4 years, I can now consider myself to be an expert in that area. And
Yes.
even there are enough management theories which suggest that to become an expert in something, let's say playing violin or in any subject kind of a thing, it needs 10,000 hours of hard work. 10,000 hours of hard work is what qualifies you to be called an expert in that area. and that if you calculate per day, it often is equivalent to doing a PhD, the number of hours. So therefore, by after doing PhD, you are now quote unquote an expert in that area. So, and how you use that expertise is up to you. In fact, unfortunately, in this country, we have made PhD programs, basically tailored to produce university professors. That need not be so. PhD is not for becoming an academic or a professor. PhD can be to become good in some area. I understand quantum area now so well after working on it for 4 years that I have identified a problem. I might want to become an entrepreneur at the end of 4 years, right? I might want to
Yes.
start a company in quantum, after the end of 4 years, because some of these deep technology areas, whether it is biotechnology, quantum technology, nanotechnology, or even the chat GPT kind of fields, you need
Yes.
PhD. Not to, you have to
Yes.
understand these areas thoroughly, and that can be as part of PhD. So I think PhD need not be to become an academic. PhD can also be to become good in some deep technology that I want to utilize that knowledge, and in that PhD time, I want to find a problem where I can apply that knowledge. I come out, I start a company in that space, and then make it big. So therefore, you can even produce entrepreneurs out of PhD programs. And in BITS, in fact, we started a program essentially for that purpose. We said that this is a PhD track for startups. So you come with
Okay.
an idea, right, where you want to start a company. You work on that idea for 4 years. By end of 4 years, you start a company and you also get a PhD for that. So
Okay.
we started a PhD program in the startup track. So this is very
Okay.
important for the country, because we should not look at PhD, slot PhD programs to produce university professors. That is
Yes.
detrimental. So PhD is to become an expert in some area. That's a good, because when you, like I said, quantum, nano, bio, you need PhD sometimes to do any innovation in that sector. So,
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for like giving us time. Thank you
thank you,
so much.
thank you. All the best. Best.